Thank you everyone who is here with us in person and online tonight. We are delivering this event hybridly, so welcome to online audience as well who are tuning in. My name is Lily Moore. I'm the Alumni Engagement Manager here at Newcastle University, and my role is to keep graduates connected to the institution and to other fellow graduates wherever they might be in the world. This event tonight is part of our Newcastle Discover series, which is an event series all about keeping you up to date with the latest in university research and hearing from industry experts about various topics that are affecting all of our daily lives. This year's Discover programme is all themed around our NCL in Action theme, which is all around AI and future tech, how those things are affecting the way we work and the way we live. So throughout this year, you'll see lots of AI-focused events, activities and opportunities that you can get involved in, whether you're a staff, student or alumnus of the university. Absolutely delighted to have you here tonight. Just a few housekeeping bits and bobs before we get started. So for those in person, obviously we are in here for the next hour. You'll have seen signs for toilets and stuff, so if you do need to leave at any time, please do. We're not expecting any fire alarms, so just make your way outside of the building if that does go off. For those joining us online, this is being delivered as a Zoom webinar, so you don't have any function with your camera or microphone, so just sit back and relax. But you can communicate any questions with us via the chat and via the Q&A. We've got a member of staff here in person who'll relay those to Hazel for you when we get to that section. And I think that's about it for event logistics. But if I have forgotten anything else, I will have a look. No, that's it. So in terms of tonight's event, we have Hazel Savage with us tonight, and we're going to be talking about, can AI truly create an original work of music? Hazel is actually an alumnus of our university, graduated in 2005, so she's coming back for 20 years since she graduated, so welcome back to campus. Hazel is a music tech lifer, and is a former CEO and co-founder of Musiio and former VP Music Intelligence at SoundCloud. So we're absolutely delighted to have Hazel here with us tonight. I'm going to stop talking and hand straight over to Hazel.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, I forgot to come over and check about the clicker, or should I just that one there?
Press the down.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Yes, I graduated in 2005 from Newcastle University, and I have to say this is probably better attended lecture than any of the ones I actually attended during my time. I did politics and English literature, and I did absolutely nothing related to that with my career, but it's an absolute pleasure to be back here tonight. So for anyone who hasn't met me before, as I said, my name is Hazel Savage. I'm originally from Darlington. So it's when I got the invitation to come back up to Newcastle, obviously I came here for uni, consider myself very much from the Northeast. So I was very, very happy to come and talk to everyone today. My area of expertise is artificial intelligence, specifically for the music industry. So I really didn't use that politics and English literature degree as much as you think I would, apart from maybe the politics for negotiating with stakeholders. It never hurts to be able to get your own way when you're doing commercial contracts or various other bits and pieces. So in terms of my work history, whilst I was at university, my very, very first job was I used to work at HMV. So the record store, for anyone who's old enough to remember. And I used to work at the Darlington store, and I did a few shifts in the Newcastle branch as well. And then I got transferred to the London Oxford Street store. So I moved to London straight after I finished university. And also, final apology today, I have just recovered from a cold. I feel completely fine, but the voice isn't as loud as it normally is. But hopefully everyone can hear me, and I'll probably just not have much voice afterwards. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about AI and music. And I know this is very much my area of expertise, something I'm very passionate. I think about day in, day out. I read about it 24/7. But for other people, it might just be a sort of a peripheral element of AI. We often hear about it in the news, but it tends to be a little bit more related to copyright and, you know, what's happening in the press with the sort of signing of the AI Accords. But I also like to look at the kind of the history of AI as well. The ability to click. There we go. I'll just give you a little So I wanted to kind of cover the recent history of music AI for anyone who's interested. Feel free to take a photo of the slide. There's a lot of companies on there, or feel free to ask for a copy of the PDF afterwards. I'm very, very happy to share this information. And I've kind of just purely through my experience of working in music tech, which I've done ever since I left university pretty much. I was at the record store from whilst I was at uni in the second year. I used to work Saturdays and Sundays. Then I went full time and I did that for another year and a half before I got my first adult job, which was in a very small startup at the time that no one had heard of called Shazam, which we probably all now have heard of. So I was employee number 20. And this is how I think of the history of music AI, is when we were looking around 2002 to 2011, we had the very, very early examples, which we probably wouldn't have called AI back at the time. And a lot of them might not have even used AI themselves, but very sort of sophisticated algorithmic searching. So Shazam, which is the ability to identify a track using a fingerprint of that track. So again, for anyone in the room who's old enough to remember what mobile phones looked like before smartphones, do you remember they all had a keypad on them, a physical keypad with actual buttons? And so when I joined Shazam, which was in 2006, the iPhone didn't come out till 2007. To use the service, you used to have to dial the 4 buttons down the middle of the phone, which were 2580. So the company I joined was called Shazam 2580. You rung that number, it was a short code, so it only worked in the UK. You held the phone up for 30 seconds, and then we would send you a text message with the name of the artist and the song you were listening to. And if we got it right, it cost 50 pence. And we had 30,000 users, and that was the company I joined. Nobody'd heard of us and nobody cared. And then the iPhone came out and suddenly everyone had heard of us and everyone cared. But the ability to essentially take the fingerprint from holding up a phone and comparing that to a database was a very sort of early algorithmic search version of AI. Of course, when I joined the company, the database was around 10 million songs. It's now over 100 million songs. So the advanced search algorithms and AI used to basically do the matching is actually where the difficult part is. The part in matching one fingerprint to another, and every song has a unique fingerprint, a lot like a human fingerprint. It's actually not that hard, the fingerprinting technology. It's how you actually search 100 million songs in the seconds that it takes to return a result that's advanced. There's also a great company called the Echo Nest and Last FM. For anyone who's followed music tech, neither of these companies exists anymore. In fact, Shazam now has been sold to Apple, so that was an acquisition. Echo Nest was sold to Spotify in 2014, I think, and Last FM was one of the original streaming services and shut down. But all of them had very, very early large sets of data that they were doing manipulative algorithmic searching on to create track recommendations. So this was kind of the very start, the very first inklings of using this type of technology in the music space. And it was really around sort of big data, large data sets. If we move into the sort of 2011 to 2018 era, this is what I call the first wave of AI startups. And I call it that because most of them ran out of money, shut down, or had a terrible product. And that's because it was a little bit too early. So Duke was one of the very first AI generated music companies. And everyone was really, really excited back in sort of 2011 to 2018 that we'd be told you can use an AI to make songs. And there was a lot of money invested in this space. A lot of people were very excited about it, right up until the point they listened to the music, at which point all of us agreed it was terrible. And so it was also very exciting, and academically, theoretically, it sounded exciting, but the actual output was not great. And, even back in 2018, when I first met my business partner, he showed me some piano music that one of the AI teams at Google had created. And he said, have a listen, and I want you to guess if it's AI generated or human. So he was kind of doing a little test on me as a business partner. And the reality is I generally couldn't tell, but what I couldn't tell was it AI generated or was it just someone who wasn't very good? So that's kind of the stage we were at in these really early days. Nothing you'd really want to listen to, nothing that was commercially viable, but Duke were out there doing it. They ran out of money, got acqui-hired to TikTok because they were a strong team of developers, but they weren't a particularly compelling product. Jack were doing a little bit more in the blockchain space. Everyone was absolutely jazzed about blockchain in 2018. And Lander are actually still going. It's an AI music mastering company. So for anyone who's in music production, the process of making a track and then you mix it so that all the levels, all the instruments are at the right sort of levels that you want them. And then mastering is the final process that you do to get it ready for publication. And in fact, if you're going to send something to Apple, it has to be a certain quality, or they won't accept it on their streaming service. So Lander's still going independently using AI to master a lot of their works. In fact, before I was a music tech founder, I was a failed punk rock star. Actually did a gig at the Newcastle Students' Union. I would say this is one of my all-time favourites. There was a punk rock band called the Slits, who were really big in the 70s and 80s. And I supported them over at Newcastle Uni. So that's one of my lifetime highlights. And but so this is what's going on in 2011 to 2018, and I actually used Lander to master the last recording that I did a few years ago. I think it's really impressive technology. I think it's a great business. And then moving to 2018 to 2023, I've actually included the logo of my own company there. So Musiio, that was the company that I started in 2018. I used to live in Singapore, which was where I started my company. And we were an AI that could listen to music. I'm going to use Musiio as a case study, so I won't go into too much detail now. But based in Singapore, started Musiio with my co-founder. And around that 2018 to 2023 is when I personally think we saw the biggest development in GPUs, in NVIDIA chips, in compute that made things possible doing AI that had not really been possible pre-2018. There was a bit of a watershed moment in terms of what the compute could actually do as a sort of a cost versus output analysis. And so the three companies I've listed here, Master Channel is another AI mastering company. So very, very similar to Lander, but they approach different markets. Master Channel does white labeling, sell their services into other big companies. Lander does direct to consumer. Audio Shake is another really, really exciting company. Female founder, Jessica Powell out of LA. And what Audio Shake did was they've created source separation technology. Now, actually, Jessica and her husband originally built this technology because they wanted to create their own karaoke mixes. They wanted to be able to remove the vocal off any song so they could perform it at karaoke. But of course, they both worked at Google. So instead of just saying, well, that would be nice, they decided to try and build it. Now, a lot of people pre-2018 had talked about source separation, and I'd tried every version. But usually it was very, very poor in quality. By the time somebody had managed to split out the drums, the guitar, the bass, and the vocals, either they've split the vocals, but when you listen, you can kind of still hear the other instruments in the background, or they basically reduced the quality of the track so much that it's now not usable. So I was very, very skeptical when I heard about this source separation technology, but Jessica gave me a demo. And for me, that was a little bit of a breakthrough moment is, holy shit, that's an actual breakthrough. You've managed to invent something that didn't work before that now does work. And obviously I built my company in 2018, sold it in 2022. Full disclosure, I'm now an investor in Audio Shake because I was so excited with the breakthrough of technology and so impressed with her as a founder. So these were the kind of companies that were coming out post 2018. Great tools that used AI to build the technology, but that were quite assistive in nature. So Audio Shake, if I think they did a big program with Green Day, the band, where they'd lost the original masters to one of their records. So Audio Shake split out all the composite tracks, and then there's some great videos of the guitarist Billy Joe Armstrong playing guitar along to the rest of the track. So Audio Shake was like, okay, you don't need to have kept your original stems, kept your original masters. Master Channel, again, the ability to master music. I just said before, when I started at Shazam, there was like 10 million tracks. And that's gone up to 100 million by the time I left the company. Well, we're seeing that kind of 10x exponential growth. It means more and more people are creating music, which is really exciting, but it also makes a challenge for what do we do with this volume of music? And rather than paying a couple of $1,000s to a producer for mastering, a really smart tool that uses AI is incredibly beneficial. And then my company, Musiio, we were very much in the space of let's build an AI that can listen to music, and we'll do all of the other things around the listening that you need. We'll tell you the key it's in, we'll tell you the BPM, we'll tell you the mood, we'll tell you the genre, we'll tell you whether there's a vocalist, we'll tell you whether that vocalist has used auto-tune. And this allows companies like SoundCloud, who eventually acquired us, to ingest an enormous amount of content, about 100,000 songs a day, and not actually have to have a human being listen to process it. Is it a podcast? Is it an hour-long mix of multiple tracks stitched together? Is it an individual song? We can fully automate that process for them. And I always say it would be better. A human would do a better job in most of these instances, but a human can't process 100,000 tracks a day. I think when we first started, I worked out that to do 30,000 songs a day, a single human would need 83 days, 24 hours back to back, if every song was 3.5 minutes. And that would not be fun. So I think AI is really useful in a lot of these spaces. But I think what's become really exciting is, you know, back when I started my company in 2018, we often didn't even call it AI, we called it ML. So we were really talking about machine learning, pattern recognition. How can we teach a computer to replicate a behavior that a human does? But I think what's really exciting is from that sort of 2023 onwards, the time at which now everyone is super, super excited, because every company in that list is working on generative AI, the ability to create new music using artificial intelligence. And what's kind of exciting and kind of a little bit terrifying is, compared to the companies that are building in 2023 to the original column, they're actually producing audio that sounds good. In fact, it's actually really hard to tell sometimes if something is AI generated or not. In fact, I finished up at SoundCloud at the end of last year, but actually I got to a point where quite a few people would send me tracks and say, oh, this is a great track, Hazel, but I think it's AI generated. What do you think? And I'd have a listen and I'd be like, yeah, I'm probably like 85% sure that's AI generated. There's a couple of tells, but I could be wrong. And so if a human can no longer tell, somebody who spends their time day in, day out on this stuff, then I also probably can't train an AI to be able to spot a fake track. And anyone who says that they've invented a technology that can, with 100% accuracy, tell you if something is AI generated is lying. And I've heard lots of people in the music industry make that claim, but so far it's not possible, because a lot of the technology that comes through in AI would look very, very similar to a pattern recognition as, say, auto-tune. So the ability to manipulate a voice, you make it into something that looks unnatural in pattern recognition to a computer, and it means it looks very similar to something that's AI generated. And I think the big debate that's going on now, which I don't necessarily have a specific answer to or a direct answer to, is, should these companies be creating the content that they're creating? Have they been built illegally? And this is the big debate that's happening in our industry, because both Suno and Udio, I think they've both raised over $100 million in funding. They're both, well, one has got a London head office, the other's a US-based company, and the VCs are backing them. The VCs think this is really powerful, but both of them have built their generative AI algorithms by ripping all the content online. So they've just gone onto all the streaming services and just downloaded a copy of it. Now, most of us in the music industry say, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to take things online that you don't have permission to use. However, both of those companies are arguing that they haven't done anything incorrectly. They're basing themselves on the sort of the fair use case that comes up in the US. If it's published online, it's fair game. But what you do see now is output of tracks on Suno and Udio, where, if you know enough about music, you can kind of hear the influence of Mariah Carey, or you can hear the influence of Taylor Swift. And ultimately, those artists aren't being compensated that their tracks have been used in data training models. So that's kind of the big argument. All of the major labels, of which there are 3, Universal Music, Sony, Warner, are all suing these companies right here because they've used this content without paying or without licensing it. And what's absolutely mad is one of those companies asked for a meeting with me, and I met up with them in London, and I kind of was like, they're going to just admit, right? They're going to be like, yeah, we scraped it, we shouldn't have. And I thought this will be an interesting conversation. But actually, they said, we've done nothing wrong. That content's online, we can use it. We're not replicating it in its entirety. We're just using it as a training data, and the output is different. Therefore, we're not making a direct copy. We're not making a direct replication. Therefore, we haven't done anything wrong, and we don't owe anyone any money. which is a really interesting take. And at the minute, our industry hasn't really decided which way it's going to go. It's in the courts, mostly in America, about whether you do have to pay for training data, whether you can use anything. And I think everyone's a little bit worried about, you know, the US and the UK and the race to be AI superpowers at the minute are trying to have as few laws and legislation around it. So it might mean that a lot of music gets used without compensating the original artists. So this is probably the biggest debate that we have. And I think the other biggest debate we have in this industry, hence the title of the talk today, is, you know, can an AI generate an original piece of music? I think the definition of original is difficult. You know, there are hundreds of thousands, millions of songs in these data sets, and they produce something that you haven't heard before, but ultimately a lot of it is a combination of other things that you've heard before. And I also do question as well a lot with this type of technology, the motive for these types of songs. Like, I find it fascinating from an academic perspective. It's fascinating that somebody took 100 million songs and then the output is a brand new song that sounds good that we've never heard before. But do I want to listen to it again and again? And do I identify with it? And do I really care if it's kind of fooling me that it's an original voice, that it's different? And we haven't really seen the commercial output for these. We know these companies have got hundreds of millions of dollars of funding, but is the audience there? Do people want to use it? What's the benefit of everyone being able to create some music from just a prompt? So these are the things that we look at when we're talking about generative AI. And I'm always often quite clear to tell people that my company was not a generative AI company. And we got our first 1 million tracks to build a data set legally by partnering with people, mainly because I didn't want to get sued for hundreds of millions of dollars by the major labels, who are petty and facetious, if nothing else. And I say that as someone who worked there. So, okay, let's see if I can jump to the next slide. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to use my own company, Musiio, as a case study, so we can jump ahead. And I think we've kind of covered this already, but quite often when people ask me, how did I come up with the idea for a company and how did I decide what I was going to do? I think it was based on that working those shifts at HMV, which was, you know, pre-2007, if you wanted to buy new music, you had to buy it on CD or cassette or vinyl, and it was available for purchase at 9 a.m. on Monday morning from a physical shop. And I know that because I was the person stacking the shelves on a Sunday night. So 4 p.m, shut it down in Darlington. Okay, we put the new CDs on the shelves. They're ready for 9 a.m. on a Monday. That's all new music. And because I was the one putting them on the shelves, I knew there was about like 5 or 6 CD singles a week. Maybe 10 in the lead up to Christmas, because everyone wanted Christmas #1, very competitive, but that was it. And in fact, quite often we would put all 5 discs on the CD player at work and listen to them all whilst we're tidying up the shop. It's a very manageable amount of music. But then I remember in 2018, when I first started working with my business partner, there was a press release in 2018 from Spotify that said they had 30,000 songs a day. And now I know from like 2023 onwards, which I think was the last time Spotify put out a press release, but also from having been at SoundCloud up until December last year, that number is way over 100,000 songs a day. So we're sort of growing exponentially. And if you think about what generative AI can do to that number, if it's 100,000 a day, but it's the click of a finger or a simple one-line prompt to create a song, we're not far off that number being 1 million tracks a day. And so what do you do with that amount of content? Like, how do you ever find the thing you want to listen to? How do you discover new music? How do you actually find anything good when the volume is so high? And this was the thing that I found in 2018 when I looked at it, is that it was great that technology had come along and sort of democratized the industry where anyone could create music and upload it online. But what hadn't happened was the technology hadn't really caught up. There wasn't really a great way to process any of this music. What labels and streaming services were doing was they were either just saying, oh, just upload everything and we'll figure it out later, or they were trying to get people to manually tag this music, but it was just unmanageable. So the thing I thought we could do, that I said to my co-founder, Swedish guy called Aaron, who I met before, I just said, could we build an AI that could listen to music? You know, it doesn't have to be as accurate as a human. And as I said before, I think often a human would do a better job, But at our peak, we were processing 5 million tracks a day, which is just not possible to do without AI. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of how we did it. And as I say, we've got a Q&A at the end, so we can go more technical or less technical, depending on who we've got in the room. But essentially what we did was we took MP3s or WAV files, we turned them into mathematical transformations, various spectrograms that we would then look for features, train the neural nets on those features, and output data in its simplest terms. Because a lot of the clients I was meeting are going, you know, they'd give us the MP3s and they'd say, oh, are you just pulling that information off Spotify, like finding the artist and title? But we weren't. We were performing the transformation on the audio file itself. So essentially turning it into a visualization. So it's machine learning, visual machine learning on features is essentially what we were doing. Next slide, please. And I think the next slide sort of demonstrates, these are a couple of the fingerprints from our technologies themselves, not all of them, but an example. And I often talk about this because a great way that I've found to explain it to people in the music industry is think about a waveform. And so this is a screenshot of Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell. I'm a big classic rock fan, if anyone couldn't tell. And this is the waveform. And when you look at a waveform front on, you can see a lot of information. You can see where it starts quieter, you can see where it gets louder, but there are a lot of things that you can't see in a waveform. It's very one-dimensional in terms of the information. Now, for anyone who doesn't know the song Bat Out of Hell, the first 48 seconds are a spoken intro, which is why that waveform is so small at the beginning. On a hot summer's night, would you offer them? I won't do the full thing, but I'm a big Meatloaf fan. So you can kind of see, so I know looking at that waveform, oh yeah, it's the one, it's the long edit, it's the one with the big 48-second spoken intro. And then I can see where the song kicks in. But if you didn't know that song, you wouldn't know if that was just a very quiet intro, you wouldn't know if it was a spoken intro. It could be entirely instrumental. You can't tell looking at that waveform. But what I always used to say to the music industry folks is, it's like instead of looking at a waveform front on, the Musiio technology, we've kind of gone up and over, and we're looking down on the audio file because all of that information is stacked. It's all that data is there, but we just have to turn it into something more complex than a waveform to be able to understand it. So with a waveform, you can't tell what genre a song is. You can only see the dynamics, how loud, how quiet. You might be able to see areas of repetition, but you won't know if it's an electronic dance song. You won't know if it's classical. You won't know if it's rock. You also can't really tell if there's a vocal by just looking at a waveform. But if you use these spectrographic transformations, all of that information is there. So these little lines here are probably the BPM. So we can see how many beats per minute in a song. So really it was just using technology that already exists, this visual transformation, these neural networks of learning to be able to transform a track into something a computer can read. And of course, then we tell the customers, it's the AI is listening to the song, but really it's looking more than anything, and it's getting the information out of the waveform. Next slide, please. So as we built the company up, as I say, I was based in Singapore, met my co-founder at a startup incubator called Entrepreneur First. We raised $2 million in seed funding from, there are no music investors in Asia, just in case anyone's wondering, but there are a lot of AI investors. So we got investors as a deep tech AI company, building proprietary models, not as a music industry company. And we spent 4 years building the company. We had 75 customers. We were doing, over 500 million tracks total. We had audio search, which is, again, using that fingerprint, search a whole database of other fingerprints. So similar to Shazam, but not just looking for a direct match, looking for similar matches as well. And we were live in over 11 countries. But we were a B2B company, so you wouldn't have ever heard of us if you don't work in music. But if you're using services such as SoundCloud, who we were not allowed to talk about at the time, a couple of the other mainstream streaming services, and some of the major labels, some of the biggest names in the world in music that you would have heard of were using our technology, but it was all in the back end. And a lot of them didn't want to talk about the relationship publicly because they would like you to think they do it all themselves. But of course, they're using technology like ours in the background. So about 70% of our customers wouldn't let us talk about who was using us. And in fact, In 2022, we were acquired by SoundCloud, so they bought the whole company, and they were probably one of our biggest clients at the time. They accounted for about 20% of our revenue, and they've been using our service for about a year and a half. And they have such a high volume of tracks. I think SoundCloud's public figure is 375 million songs in their entire database. So they had the biggest need for a technology like ours, because that was an almost invisible database to them. And they were using our technology for a year and a half. And I think they thought, that number's just going up and up. Our bill's just going to keep going up and up. How much for the whole thing? And of course, that was a conversation. So in 2022, we sold the company to SoundCloud, and I worked there for 3 years, just finishing up last December. Next slide, please. But I wanted to show an example as well. And in fact, Musiio still exists. We still have all our third-party clients, which was another reason why I was happy to sell to SoundCloud. A lot of companies wanted to buy us with the idea that they would shut us down so no one else could use us. But I like the idea that SoundCloud were going to keep the technology in the market, because I think it's a very, very valuable technology. And in fact, if you go to musio.com, you can still try the demo. So I've put a little link there where you can try the tag demo. So essentially what you do is, if you go to musio.com or the bit.ly link here, you can actually try it. And what we let people do, if there's any musicians in the room, you can actually upload one of your own tracks if you're a musician, or you can actually drop in a SoundCloud link or a YouTube link, and we will tag it in real time. And the thing that I found really powerful about this demo is, because to me, it's not enough to talk about AI. You really have to show people it working, because that, for me, takes it from that sounds interesting to, holy shit, it actually works. That's incredible. So this is just a track that I dropped in, Soulwax, much against everyone's advice. A band I'm a big fan of from Belgium. I think I actually originally put this one up there because I did this talk in Belgium. The Belgians, not up for a laugh. I'll tell you that now. So they got absolutely no joy from me picking the local band. And you know what? I nearly put a local band in as well, because also, confession time. You know, when people ask you what was the first show you ever went to? So I have like two answers depending on like how cool I'm trying to be or how honest I'm trying to be. And so the cool answer is, when I was 15 years old, I went to see Feeder at Middlesbrough Town Hall with my best friend Felicity, who I was at uni with, and I had a great time. But the real answer is that when I was 13, my mum brought me to Newcastle Town Hall and we saw Jimmy Nail. So I should have put Jimmy Nail up there, shouldn't I? But anyway, we've got Soulwax. And so what you do is you drop I took the YouTube video, I dropped the link into the demo, and these are the outputs. These are what you see. So you can see for content type, we've got music, and in brackets, we've got 83%. So the percentage is how confident the AI is that that tag is correct. So most of our tags come with a confidence score of 0 to 100, because sometimes it's helpful to know how confident the AI is that that is a correct piece of data. And under content type, we're doing music, spoken word, podcast, sound effect, drone. I think we have 8 different types of audio content, because of a lot of our customers, they'll be getting fed material and they're really not sure. You know, there was one point where podcasts got paid out at a lower royalty rate than music. So all the podcasters were trying to upload their podcast as music to get more money. So these are the kind of things, as a technology company, you have to police slightly, but no one's going to sit and listen to every single podcast that's uploaded. So just telling people it's music, first off, very helpful. And then the second thing is genre. So we've got rock and alternative rock, 70% and 64%, sure that those are good tags. We offer between 2 and 4 genres, depending on the track that's uploaded. And we also, if it's below 40%, with this demo, the way we visualize that is we say with elements of. So if there was like a 40% electronic, it'd say with elements of electronic. But what these percentages allow our customers to do is say, okay, well, anything over 70, call it a primary genre, anything under is a subgenre. But then we also did have customers where they just say, do you know what, just don't show anything under 50%, because we only want it if it's a very, very high accuracy. So allowing the customers to have that level of flexibility with their data, rather than just, here's the data, it's a rock song. It gave the customers more flexibility. We've also got an energy spectrum. Moods, again, with the percentages, and emotion spectrum, the instruments that the AI can hear or see within the song, bass, drums, guitar, percussion. And then we also have a vocal tag. So instrumentation, is it vocal or instrumental? Just one or the other. The only thing that throws it off occasionally, whistling. So there's just, it doesn't come up that often. I'd say it's less than 0.1% of all tracks, but sometimes a track will have only whistling and it will show up as vocal, but the client would really rather it says instrumental because there isn't any singing. We really never figured out the whistling error. The vocal register. So we have whether it sounds like male, sounds like female, mixed. We do allow the customers, obviously you can change the verbiage there if you want to have high register, low register to be more gender inclusive, and we really leave that up to the clients. For vocal presence, how much vocal is there on the track? Is it just a little bit of vocal, or is there predominantly vocals across the majority of the track, high, medium and low? And then also auto-tune presence. Has the vocal been manipulated and does it have auto-tune on it? So none on this. So we're listening to a relatively authentic vocal. And then everything in bold at the bottom is also a tag. So it's medium quality. We can take that with a pinch of salt because this is a YouTube video, so we might have a slightly lower codex. But usually when clients are uploading their MP3s or their original files, that's pretty accurate. But it's also not a judgment. You know, if you drop in the original Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, not the remastered version, it will show up as medium quality. And it's really more an indication of the age of the track or the equipment if it was recorded on the original sort of analog recording equipment. So medium quality track, it's in D minor as a key. It's 138 beats per minute with a small variance. It doesn't vary much across the life of the track. So we're able to generate this sort of 20 to 30 pieces of metadata, as I say, at our peak for 5 million tracks a day. And you can run lots of tracks in parallel. We had a music producer who used to come along and drop his track into our demo to find out what the AI thought he was building, what type of genre the AI said he was writing music in. And then he'd use that to iterate on his next versions, to create the next versions of his songs. I also have a random client in Japan who every week drops about 200 tracks in here. And I'm like, if you don't want to pay for it, that's fine. This is a free demo. But also, if he's happy to use his time copy and pasting all of this data for 200 tracks a week, then in my opinion, he gets to use it for free. So this is Musiio, and this is what we do at its core. And if you go to our website, the demo is available for anyone to try. And I tended to find when I was meeting with customers, there's kind of two approaches. People who would just softball it, drop in a Taylor Swift, drop in an Ed Sheeran, and then people who really want to it up and drop in something they absolutely know we're going to struggle with. I think one time a client gave me some Mongolian throat singing with classical violin mixed in, and surprise, surprise, we hadn't trained the AI to be able to recognize that specific set of music. So it will kind of come up with something like folk, but like 40% sure. So this is kind of how it responds to the data. So feel free to go and drop anything in you like. Next, I wanted to touch a little bit on about ethical AI in music, as this came up a lot when we were building Musiio. So we actually did a fantastic project with Rolls-Royce, who built an open ethical framework called the Alethea framework. It's available as a PDF to download. That's the bit.ly there. You can go and download it. There's a little video of me on their website talking about it. And I really enjoyed this project whilst I was at Musiio because it really distilled a lot of the things that I was thinking about when it came to AI, which is this something a human is capable of doing? And when it comes to, like, any human can tag one piece of music. Most of us, I mean, some of us might struggle with the key if we're not classically trained musicians, but most of us could listen to a song, tell you if someone's singing on it, tell you if the genre that it is. But none of us in this room could do 5 million a day. So therefore, AI has a benefit. It can do something that's physically not possible for us to do. And then the other thing that the framework distilled for me is it something humans want to do? And what I found fascinating is when we first started the company in 2018, as a sort of benchmark, I manually tagged 1,000 tracks, and it took me 2 weeks. And it was from a data set called the Free Music Archive, which is still online. It's about 120,000 tracks. And it was just a horrible experience. Some of the tracks, one of the tracks was just a guy screaming. And I had to listen to that. And it's like almost like snow blindness. It's like white noise in the ears, you know, and you don't do as well after, you know, when you're waiting for lunch, when you're hungry. You don't do as well in the afternoon. You don't perform as well as a human when it's not the type of music you like. You don't do as well when you're accumulating song on top of song on top of song and you're not really listening. So I actually did it manually, and it's not a fun job. It's essentially very, very basic metadata and data processing. In fact, when we got to the sort of 2022 of building the company, of course, for certain people, I'd say, yes, we're an artificial intelligence company for the music industry. But also, I would often just say, we're a data processing company. It just so happens that the data we process is music, but we're just processing large amounts of data. That's what we do. It's not very glamorous in the end. And so we weren't really doing something that a lot of humans want to do. It's not an exciting job to tag music. It's not even a particularly interesting job. And the reality is most companies just don't do it, don't pay for it. So I really enjoyed the open framework because it had me look at all these questions and address, is the type of AI that we're doing, is it a net benefit to my industry? Music? Does it help people? Are we doing it in an ethical way? Are we removing jobs? And actually, in the entire lifetime of Musiio, I don't think we ever replaced a human being. Nobody ever lost a job or got let go from a team, because the reality was they either bought the data processing from us or they just didn't have it and had a less good product. So that was an exciting thing to do, and you can still download the PDF to this day, and it's an open source resource for everyone. And it's a great starting point for looking at ethical AI. And again, I've just included a couple of logos down the bottom because the big generative AI companies that I talked about in the initial timeline are using the US copyright of fair use. This is the law that they're relying on to say that they haven't broken the rules. But also there are new bodies coming out all the time, Fairly Trained, which is a collection of artists who are grouping together to say, you can't use our material without paying for it. A lot of famous artists, Paul McCartney, the folks from ABBA, they're all signing up to say that they don't agree that you should be able to use whatever you want. So there's very much a split in our industry. And then I've also included a logo of a company called Soundful, which is a company who are building generative AI ethically. So what they do is they partner with artists, get the agreement to use their content, license it correctly, and then basically build models off the back of that. So I think the first artist they did it with was Lady Gaga's producer, DJ White Shadow. So you can go on to Soundful and you can generate music using his content, and ultimately he gets a share in that experience. So there are people building in a different space. Okay, and I also wanted to come on to AI companies I am excited about. So I probably get asked this the most often. And the reality is, since I sold my company in 2022, I've now become an investor in other AI music tech companies, almost exclusively AI music tech, because it's the only thing I know anything about. So these are the companies that I'm kind of excited about at the minute. Make It is a generative AI company. So actually, I think that is the only one on here that I currently have an investment in. We had Audio Shake on the first slide as well. Actually, AI Acoustics, I'm trying to invest in this company. I've made an offer, but you know, let's see if they want me. But essentially, if you go on their website, I think it's one of the most fascinating use cases of AI I've seen in the last 10 years. It's basically the ability to clean any audio format using AI, but it's not just taking the dirty sound off the top, the fuzz, it's kind of back painting the voice using artificial intelligence, you know. And there's a really exciting demo on their website of somebody on the tube in London who's speaking into a microphone. And I don't know if you've ever got the tube in London, it's that squealing, deafening, can't speak over it, and it can completely eradicate that background noise entirely and make the human voice sound natural and like it was recorded in a $10 million studio. So hopefully AI Acoustics will take my money, because I think they're going to be the next big thing. But also I wanted to include some of the other exciting generative AI companies who are also all building in the legal space. So Soundful, DJ White Shadow, who I talked about, Gen AI, which spelled with a J, is a US-based company. Shara Sandaroff, who built Raised in Space, which was a big investor with Scooter Braun, Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift's original manager, and they are licensing the music. They truly believe that you should have to pay and you should have to get the music. And then also Two Shot, which is an AI-generated sound effects company. They're based in London. Really, really exciting. So these are the kind of companies that are coming up where I'm interested in new models that are legally using data to create things. But the reality is, you know, even talking to Jen, the output from Jen is not as good as the output of Suno and Udio, because they just took everything from online. However, Jen has done it legally and is trying to pass the money back to the artist. So it will take longer and the quality will take longer to get there. but probably not as long as we think. And lastly, I wanted to just drop in an example that's slightly outside of the music industry space, because I find all of this AI, well, probably AI voice tech, I'm going to call it, fascinating. And I think HeyGen is a really exciting company. I'm not an investor. I don't think they need my money at all. But actually, there's a little video here that you can go to the link and watch. And it's an AI generated avatar of me. And all I needed to do was speak into a camera for 2.5 minutes, and I can now type anything into this demo and this AI will say it. And what's funny about it is it's almost unclockable, to the point where I did that video and I sent it to my mum and sister, and neither of them recognised that it wasn't actually me, which is also terrifying. But the other thing as well is there are a couple of tells. So as I said before, I'm from Darlington. I know I've got a bit of a sore throat, but in case you noticed, I pronounce it AI. But if you watch the demo, she says AI, slightly more southern, slightly posher. And so, but that's really the only tell. Is there's just the accent isn't quite there, because obviously it's probably not trained on a very large data set of people from Teesside and the northeast. So it's a little, and it really messed up my Scouse friend who tried it. He came out very Rishi Sunak, very Rishi Sunak. But it's a little bit terrifying, and there's a couple of movements that aren't 100% there, but it's still incredible. But I like the idea that I could send my avatar to various boring company meetings that I don't have to attend, and it would look like I'm watching it intently and participating. So I do like that idea. But also, I think it's really scary because I haven't tested the outer limits of it. What can I type in that demo? What can and can't I get my AI to say? What horrific things could I get it to say? Obviously, I'm not going to do that because I don't want anything out there like that. But you know, I made sure when I did this demo that the security was really good, 2-factor authentication login, you know, and the uploading process, because once somebody has, and all they need is 2.5 minutes of footage of you, there is more than enough footage of me online to be able to probably fake a video of me saying almost anything. And I think all of us as a society are going to have to get better at being able to tell what is real and what's not real. And as I say, if my own mother couldn't tell it wasn't me, I think that's where the real area of risk. In a lot of ways, music is a lot low risk. And I used to say this when I started my company. You know, my company built playlists. We added metadata to music. Worst case scenario, we build a playlist of 10 songs and 9 of them are good and 1 isn't so good. Most people can live with that. But when it comes to AI for generating avatars, when it comes to AI in a medical setting, you know, 9 out of 10 cancer diagnoses being correct, it's nowhere near high enough. It needs to be 100%. So AI is kind of fun and frivolous sometimes in the music aspect. But also, yeah, if you want to have a little try of HeyGen, because they let you do a little free demo and you can watch the video of me. And you've all seen me speak today, so you should be able to tell how accurate you think it is. Okay, so I think we can move on to any questions. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to be my own moderator. If anyone in the crowd would like to ask a question. Oh yes, question at the back.
You talked about the quantity of new music, generated music.
Yeah.
And it's logging the streaming services now. There is so much of it. Is there any way of sort of maybe adjusting for quality, any algorithm that will allow you to select which music ought to go on?
Yeah, really, really great question. And this is something I think about all the time, which is there's so much music being released online these days. I'm sort of waiting for the hammer to fall. And for me, that hammer to fall is, at what point does one of the streaming services stop accepting everything? And almost nobody wants to be the first. So they're all just kind of accepting stuff at the minute and dealing with it in whatever way they can. But, you know, it's not an uncommon statistic that it's something like 45% of every track on Spotify has never had a single stream. So, and the other thing I know is to host 100 million tracks online costs millions of dollars a year. Like the cloud computing to host that database is insane. So there's a huge cost to kind of storing all of that data. There's a huge cost to being able to sort it, to put it in front of people. And I really don't think our industry has a solution for if that number suddenly goes 10x in the next 6 to 12 months. At what point do we say, we're not going to take everything? So I watch the news feeds with interest, because for me, that's the next step, because you can't, it's already, music streaming is already an insanely unprofitable business. You know, for every dollar Spotify earns, they pay 70 cents back to the music industry. Now, the music industry argue that's not high enough, but also no business starting today with a 30% margin would look attractive to any kind of investor. So there's a lot of issues. And I think, you know, if that cost continues to go up to store all the music, someone's going to have to be the first to say, we're only going to take from certain sources, which is a shame in some ways, because, you know, I like the democratization of, you know, I could record a track tomorrow and put it on Spotify. I like that that currently exists. But I think the reality is there's a lot. Good point. Thank you. Oh, and we'll go down here and then up there and then online. Perfect.
Kind of following on from that. So something like where you see stories of saying, I've written this track, but somebody's stolen my track and uploaded it on their own page. Could something like Musiio be used in like fraud detection?
Yeah, good question. So they're talking about whether you can use AI detection. So yes, and there are a lot of technologies that currently work in the back end to solve this. I'm currently working with a DJ who has suddenly become very popular, 8 million streams on Spotify, but people keep randomly uploading his songs to SoundCloud just under a different name. And SoundCloud's very much got that culture of, you know, sort of unofficial uploads, and they kind of dance in that grey area. But there are a lot of checks in the back end. So if you try and upload something to one of the major streaming services with the name Justin Bieber, they'll flag that you're not really Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift. So they're looking for those names, but the hackers just get more and more sophisticated, and, you know, changing the name, adding an extra I, changing the spelling. And so it really is a bit of a whack-a-mole to take down all the content. But it's actually a much simpler version of AI technology. It's more akin to the Shazam technology, because really what you're looking for is a direct replica. Of course, yes, sometimes something like Musiio would be more helpful if just a part of a song or a section or a sample. But really, if something is a wholesale replication, then something like Shazam, or there's a Chinese company called ACR Cloud, which is a back-end tool a lot of the streaming services use to check that what's being uploaded doesn't come up as like, oh yeah, that is Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the back end, but as quickly as the companies in the tech can innovate, the scammers and the money launderers are equally as motivated. Thank you for the question. Question at the back?
Kind of leading on.
Oh, sorry, I'm struggling to hear you.
Sort of leading on from that again, the decision that Spotify's made about the less than 1,000 listeners per month, that kind of comes, I know they're trying to say it's on the back of AI generated playlists and things like that. Do you think that might see people move away from streaming platforms on the back of it and back to possibly physical?
Yeah. Good question. So for anyone who, like us, doesn't obsessively read the music press, Spotify has come out to say that if you have less than 1,000 plays on your track, then they won't pay you any royalties on that music. So again, for the sort of 45% of their 100 million database, those tracks aren't getting any money anyway. And I don't know, I'm sort of in a bit of a mixed place with it, which is because for less than 1,000 streams, talking pennies anyway, it doesn't really move the needle for most artists. But then collectively, if there's enough of them, it is quite a large bunch of music, and we're just taking that away from independent artists and funneling it back into the major artists. Because, and this is the other thing that most people don't realize, streaming services pay out on a pro rata model, which most people don't think. They think, my money goes to who I listen to. So if I pay my $10 a month and I listen to nothing but Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell, he gets my $10, right? Incorrect. My $10 goes into the big pot of money, and they say, well, 50% of all listening was Taylor Swift, so she gets 50% of all the money, regardless if I never listened to her work at all. So the pro rata model is also massively threatened by AI, because you can massively dilute the number of artists that are in that pro rata model. So for years and years of the major labels saying pro rata is the only way to go, suddenly they think it would be nice to do a pay-per-stream model now that it won't benefit them. So that's kind of an interesting part of the economics of the music industry. But I also think that's sort of only paying people when they get 1,000 streams and over. It's more akin to something like YouTube. Like, how does YouTube compensate their creators? If you have very, very low streams, you don't fall into that bracket. If you're above that certain amount, you do. So I can see how and why they're doing it. And to me, it's maybe connected to the first question. It's the first step towards, please don't, if you're not going to get traction, don't send us your content. But I think, yeah, so I think it could just be a step in that direction. Great question. Have we got any online?
We have got a couple, yes. So the first is, do you think music students now and in the future should be taught AI as part of their studies?
100%. Should students be taught AI? Even if it's not that you should use AI, it definitely should be part of the curriculum, because, I mean, it is the #1 conversation in the music industry. You know, when I started a company in 2018, nobody cared. Like, I was like, we're doing AI, and people were like, fuck off. But I would say now it's like the most in-demand thing to talk about. Suddenly everyone wants to talk to me about AI, which that's great news for me. But if you're not talking about it, you're probably missing a trick. And even if that comes from very simple things like the assistive tools I talked about, do you know what, you know, say you want to set yourself up as somebody who does mastering music production for a living, you need to know about the AI alternatives, because you do have a point of difference, but you need to know who your competition is. And the same with all the tools when it comes to source separation, when it comes to being able to, you know, even as I said, using auto-tune on a track. I think it's a really, really important part of the curriculum. And you know, knowledge is power. So knowing more about it. That said, you don't ever have to use it. Quite a lot of artists are quite anti-AI, especially from a generative perspective. I've got no issue with that at all. But the more you know, the more you can have an informed response. Ooh. Right. Any other questions, or do you want to go a couple more? Oh,
I've got, well, there's a couple around ethics, actually, if we're touching on that. And whether AI is able to create original work, will there be a lot of legal cases in the future where trying to figure out who actually produced this work, what is original?
Yeah, I think what we're kind of waiting for with generative AI is I can't name you like a massive hit that's as big as a hit by a human being. Like, so no AI has had a kind of a hit #1 single on the scale of Taylor Swift. If and when we see that happen, then people are, because if there's no money in it, there's no incentive for anyone to sue that person. But if a track becomes really big, and like it's previously happened with just non-AI generated music, people think actually that's similar to something I've done, similar to a work, then we will start to see those court cases. I don't think we're seeing that much of them. But there is a really fascinating story as well about I can't remember the specifics, I'll have to look it up after, but there was a guy who basically wrote a computer program to generate every combination of chords ever. And he ran the whole thing through, so basically just used a computer program to generate every combination of chords, and then he put the whole thing in the public domain. So that theoretically, any case that goes to court now that says, I invented this combination of chords, this guy's already published it. And that's really kind of messed up our industry a little bit as well. But one of the biggest challenges with the music industry, and a reason I often put people off it, is it's insanely litigious. You know, I mean, I actually got to speak on a panel with the founder of Dropbox. And I said yes, because I wanted to meet him, because I thought that's super cool. And so I went over to Amsterdam, and he got on stage, and the first thing he said is, I hate the music industry. It's just a bunch of lawyers suing a bunch of other lawyers, and I'll never work in it again. And I was like, strong take. But the reason he said that is because he got sued because one of Beyonce's albums was leaked by a Dropbox. He didn't build Dropbox to be a tool for Beyonce's music to get released, but he ended up getting sued for hundreds of millions of dollars. And the music industry is insanely litigious, and they have more lawyers than they have anything else. So it's a kind of a buyer beware situation. Should we go to that question?
Yes. It's about popular music you're talking. And your question, I applied immediately to my own enthusiasm, which is classical music, romantic music, jazz, many others. And the sophistication of that doesn't actually apply. I saw that. The analysis was it's in a certain key, it's certain beats per minute. Dynamics are not mentioned in any of this. There's so many aspects to music, which it seems to me that AI cannot accommodate. And you've answered my question, really. You said, has anything that's been generated by AI had actually much traction?
Great question. So
Can you give it a Mozart piano concerto and it will write another one?
yes, but would people be as bothered? Because it's not actually Mozart. I think that's and so actually, funnily enough, back when I was at Shazam, one of my areas of expertise was classical music. I know I said I'm a big rock fan, but I love classical as well. And one of the reasons they brought me on at Shazam was because they were really struggling with the idea that in classical music, the concept of who is the artist of this track is not as straightforward. So it might be, let's think of a good example. It might be Mozart, but actually it might be more important that it's Lang Lang performing, pianist. So sometimes people want to know who was the composer, and sometimes they want to know who is the performer. And, you know, even when I worked in HMV on Oxford Street, I was in the big classical music part downstairs in the basement, and we would often have 15 to 20 versions of every major piece of classical composition, and people would come in because they're looking to buy the latest one. Yes, I've heard the Barenboim, I've heard the whatever. There's been a new release. I want to hear it. And sometimes people would come in and just ask for a recommendation. Sometimes people were price sensitive, so be like, we've got the $5 Naxos option if you're interested. So classical music fans tend to be this whole different world of their own. They're sometimes interested in different things, but also classical music doesn't tend to chart in the same way in 2025 that hip hop and electronic music does. So it's often a whole separate data set for training. You know, you can't take a lot of hip hop music and train a classical music. You have to take all the classical music and train it. So, but I go back to your last point in the question, which is, I personally am not quite seeing the demand. So there's so much great music out there, and there's so much great classical music. And I have my own sizable collection on CD, that I don't personally feel the need to have AI generate me a whole new work. Maybe just out of interest, maybe as a novelty, I'd just kind of like to see what it does. But I'm not sure yet that we're really, as a society, seeing the demand, seeing the pull. You know, in the same way that when something like social media started, it just exploded. Everyone wanted to be on it. Everyone, was connecting. And we're not quite seeing that level of pull yet with AI generated music. It's still a little bit in the novelty sector, like kind of interesting that it can do it, but nobody's really wholesale moving towards that. But you never know what Gen Alpha are going to do. They might surprise us. Great question. Thank you. Yeah, one more question in the room. Oh, there's a young chap at the back, I think, who had that. And I'm going to be around for like 15, 30 minutes after, so anyone can chat.
So do you think there's going to be a risk of people using like AI models like yours to kind of over rely on it in terms of the quality of music? So like as an artist, they're like, oh, I want to make the best rock song, but this app is only saying it's like 70% rock, and we keep trying to get higher or higher. And like you said, with so many songs coming out at the moment, people try to kind of filter down what songs they want to listen to, so they'll only give 100% pop and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So is AI going to reduce the quality of the music? I think possibly, like with all things, and like when the first synthesizer keyboard came out, a lot of people thought, well, this is a lot easier to play than a piano. You just press a button and a whole song comes out. And I think people thought that might be the death of original music. And then also what streaming services have done to music. As I say, I think I've mentioned it multiple times, but one of my favorite songs, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, I think the original version's 6.5 minutes long. Well, if you get over 31 seconds of a track played on a streaming service, you get paid. So there isn't much incentive to be much longer than that. And we're seeing more 1.5 minute, 2 minute songs. There isn't really any reason for someone to put out a 6.5 minute song. So we're seeing songs become a lot shorter, and we're also seeing riffs kick in a lot quicker. The other one, you know, the favorite example, I think it's the Phil Collins In the Air Tonight with the drum solo, and the song doesn't kick in until like 2 minutes into the song. That would be almost impossible to get any traction on a streaming service these days because people are so quick on the skip. So the technology we have has already shifted listening behaviors and already shifted listening patterns. And I think AI will further do that. And of course, there is always a risk that a lot becomes the lowest common denominator. You know, like even when auto-tune came out and like using it too much so that you could really hear the effect becomes stylistic choice. And I think there'll probably be some things with AI where we see some really obvious tells and we see some really obvious repetition that almost becomes that's AI generated. And it will kind of lead to a kind of a new, I don't know if anyone's like listened or watched Skibbity Toilet, but it's like a mashup of like 2 different songs, and it's got a weird animation that's part video game, and there's like 72 episodes. It's actually mad and I love it. And my 9-year-old nephew thinks I'm cool, which is great. So there's just, you know, I'm always interested, and I don't think that culturally is less valid. I think it's fascinating, to be honest. Will it become the type of music that I personally like and listen to above all the classic rock music that I like? Probably not. But I do think more so people who are a little bit intimidated by AI are missing a trick, in that we've always had change in technology. Streaming services change the music we listen to. The synthesizer changed the music we listen to. And I love it, going all the way back to, you know, back in the day, it used to be a really solid living to be a piano player in a bar. And then, of course, the wax cylinder was invented. They no longer had to pay humans. They could just play music from the wax cylinder, and probably loads of people lost their jobs. So we've seen that kind of transition. Technology always comes in and changes music. I think those of us who will be most successful are those of us who embrace it, but also want to drive it forward in the right way. And for me, that is compensating artists and compensating musicians. But yeah, there will be some weird bubble stuff that just sounds the same and is weird as hell. But yeah, good question. Okay, I think we're done. So I'm going to pass back to Lily. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Hazel. I'm going to have Meatloaf Spout Hell stuck in my head now all night. So homework for everyone is to go home and listen to that song en route. But just want to say a huge thank you. Massive thank you. Really, really interesting talk. And thank you to everyone who's with us here in the room, everyone who's joined us online. If you want to join more upcoming events that we've got on as part of this programme, you can see them on screen now. Our next Discover event is in a couple of weeks' time. It will be an online webinar. The future of AI is on the edge. So it's about our AI hub based here at Newcastle, and how the research we're doing here is having real life applications. So hope to see everyone again soon. Thank you again for coming. Please share any feedback that you have with us. We'll be hanging around at the end if anyone does want to chat, and have a lovely evening. And just another huge thank you to Hazel.